"You're not seriously driving this thing on public roads, are you?" The young highway patrol officer smirked as he stepped out of his cruiser, mirrored sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun. His partner circled the vehicle slowly, shaking his head in theatrical disbelief. The truck in question was a 1985 Ford F-150. Its once vibrant blue paint now faded to dusty gray, rust creeping along the wheel wells like aged scars. What these officers didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known as they exchanged knowing glances and prepared their citations, was that in exactly 10 minutes, a convoy of 8 military vehicles carrying 42 Marines would arrive at this exact spot, on Highway 76, just outside Oceanside, California. Marcus Cole sat behind the wheel, hands resting calmly at 10 and 2, his weathered face unchanged by the mockery. At 68 years old, he'd heard far worse in far more dangerous places. "License and registration," the first officer said, his tone carrying that particular blend of boredom and condescension reserved for confused old men. Who should have stopped driving years ago? Marcus reached slowly into the glove compartment, producing a worn leather wallet. He handed over the documents without a word, his gray eyes steady, patient, waiting. Marcus Cole wakes every morning at 0500 hours, not because an alarm forces him, but because for decades of discipline don't simply disappear when you trade a uniform for civilian clothes. His small ranch sits 12 miles outside Oceanside, a modest property with a white wooden fence that needs painting and a barn that's seen better decades. The house is simple, clean, organized with military precision. Bed made before coffee is poured, dishes washed before the sun fully rises. Everything in its place, because chaos in small things leads to chaos in large ones. And Marcus learned that lesson in places where chaos meant death. The Ford F-150 sits in the driveway like an old loyal dog, too stubborn to quit. Marcus bought it new in 1985 with his first paycheck after returning stateside. 40 years later, the paint has faded and rust has claimed the wheel wells. But the engine purrs like the day he drove it off the lot. He's rebuilt that engine twice, replaced the transmission, upgraded the suspension. What looks like neglect is actually intimate knowledge. The kind of care that doesn't need to announce itself with shine and polish. This morning, his mission is straightforward: drive into town, pick up supplies for the annual Marine Corps charity reunion at Camp Pendleton, folded flags, donation boxes, service ribbons for the families. Simple work, but necessary work, the kind that keeps communities connected to those who served. Marcus backs the truck out at exactly 0630, checking his mirrors with the same attention he once gave to convoy positions. Old habits, good habits. The Marine Corps' bumper sticker on the rear window has faded to barely readable. Much like Marcus himself, those who deserve respect most often look like they need it least. And Marcus Cole, driving his rusty truck down Highway 76, looked like he needed plenty. "Sir, this truck is a safety hazard," the first officer said, circling the F-150 with exaggerated concern. "Rust on the frame, questionable brake lights, tires that look older than my career. Are you sure you know where you're going? You're not lost, are you? The condescension dripped from every word, each syllable designed to diminish, to establish superiority through mockery rather than merit. Marcus stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a posture so natural he didn't realize he'd assumed it. I know exactly where I'm going, officer. I'm headed to Camp Pendleton to deliver supplies for a charity event. The second officer smirked. Camp Pendleton? Sir, with all due respect, that's a military base. Are you certain you have the right location? He exchanged a glance with his partner, the kind of look that said everything without words. Another confused old man. Another waste of time. I'm certain, Marcus replied, his voice level, patient. The same tone he'd once used with nervous 18-year-olds fresh off the bus at boot camp, terrified and trying not to show it. We're going to need to search the vehicle, the first officer announced, already moving toward the truck bed. Just a safety precaution. You understand? It wasn't a question. Marcus understood perfectly. He understood this had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with power. About two young men flexing authority they'd been given, but hadn't yet earned. They pulled open the tailgate roughly, rooting through the contents like investigators hunting for contraband. What they found instead were neatly folded American flags, boxes labeled Marine Corps Reunion Charity, donation forms organized in plastic sleeves, service ribbons preserved with care. The first officer held up a flag, his expression caught between confusion and amusement. What's all this? Playing dress-up at your age? You some kind of wannabe Marine. Across the street at the Stop and Go diner, Jake Williams set down his coffee cup, his attention locked on the scene unfolding near the gas pumps. 35 years old, 6 years removed from active duty, Jake had been a sergeant in the Marine Corps before returning to civilian life. Something about the old man's posture triggered recognition, a nagging familiarity he couldn't quite place. The way Marcus stood, perfectly still despite the disrespect, the controlled breathing, the silence that spoke volumes. A small crowd had gathered now, a mixture of locals and travelers, their phones out, recording. Some murmured sympathy, others shook their heads with judgment. The world always splits cleanly between those who see dignity and those who see only what dignity lacks. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign that his patience was wearing thin. But he maintained composure, maintained that infuriating calm that comes from facing actual threats, actual danger, actual enemies. These officers weren't enemies. They were simply young, ignorant, and drunk on small authority. He'd seen it before. He'd corrected it before, too. Jake's eyes caught the name on one of the donation forms the officer was carelessly waving around. Marcus Cole. The name hit him like a physical blow. His coffee cup clattered against the saucer. No, it couldn't be. Sergeant Major Marcus Cole? The Marcus Cole? Jake's hands were already reaching for his phone, fingers trembling slightly as he dialed the duty officer line at Camp Pendleton. Camp Pendleton. Duty office, Corporal Stevens speaking. This is Jake Williams, Marine Corps veteran, Serial number 2,156,789. You need to get someone out here right now. Highway 76, near the Oceanside exit. Local police have stopped Sergeant Major Marcus Cole. There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. Did you say Sergeant Major Cole? Are you certain? I'm looking at him right now. They're searching his vehicle, treating him like some confused old man. You need to move. Now, stay on the line. Do not let them take him anywhere. The urgency in the corporal's voice was unmistakable. In the background, Jake heard shouting, boots hitting pavement, engines starting. Meanwhile, the first officer was pushing further. Sir, we're going to need you to come down to the station for an evaluation. Your behavior here suggests you might not be fit to operate a vehicle. Marcus's response was measured, calm, absolutely final. Officer, I'm not going anywhere unless you're charging me with a specific violation. And we both know you have no grounds for that. 10 minutes. That's all it would take. 10 minutes and everything would change. The sound came first. A deep, rumbling growl of multiple engines approaching fast from the south. Heads turned. The officers paused mid-sentence. 8 military vehicles rounded the bend onto Highway 76. Humvees and troop transports moving in tight formation. Their presence commanding immediate attention. They didn't slow down gradually. They arrived with purpose, with urgency, forming a precise semicircle perimeter around the gas station in less than 30 seconds. 42 Marines exited in perfect synchronization, boots hitting pavement in unified rhythm. They moved into formation without a single verbal command. Muscle memory and training creating order from chaos. The crowd fell silent. Phones that had been recording mockery now captured something entirely different. From the lead Humvee, a man in dress uniform stepped out. Lieutenant Colonel James Rivera, 51 years old. 28 years of service etched into every line of his face. He walked directly toward Marcus, his stride purposeful, his eyes locked on the old man standing beside the rusty Ford. He stopped 3 feet away, came to attention, and delivered a salute so sharp it could have cut glass. Sergeant Major Cole. Sir, the title landed like a bomb in the sudden silence. Sergeant Major, the officer holding the donation forms, went pale. His partner's hand dropped from his belt, his swagger evaporating instantly. Rivera held the salute until Marcus returned it, then spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Sergeant Major Marcus Cole, 35 years of service to the United States Marine Corps. 3 combat deployments, Beirut, Fallujah, and Helmand Province. Medal of Honor recipient for actions in Fallujah, where he single-handedly held a position. For 6 hours under enemy fire, saving 17 Marines. This man trained over 3,000 United States Marines, including myself. He is a living legend in the Corps, gentlemen. The first officer tried to speak, his voice cracking. Sir, I didn't. We had no idea. Rivera's gaze cut to him like a blade. You had no idea because you didn't ask. You saw an old truck and an old man and assumed you knew everything worth knowing. Behind him, 42 Marines stood at rigid attention, a wall of respect and solidarity, The crowd's murmurs had transformed completely. Phones captured the moment with reverence now, the commons shifting from judgment to shame. They stopped a Medal of Honor recipient. Look at those Marines. That poor man. Marcus stood exactly as he had before, unchanged by validation, unmoved by vindication. His weathered face calm. Lieutenant Colonel Rivera turned his full attention to the two officers, his voice carrying controlled fury. "Do you understand what you've done here? You've disrespected a decorated war hero, a man who earned his stripes in blood while defending the very freedoms that allow you to wear that badge." Marcus raised one hand, a gesture so subtle yet so commanding that Rivera stopped mid-sentence. "That's enough, Lieutenant Colonel." His voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. He stepped toward the officers, his weathered face calm, patient. "You saw an old truck and an old man, and made assumptions. You decided his worth based on rust and age. That's the lesson here, gentlemen. Never assume someone's value by what they drive or how they look." The first officer's face had gone from pale to red, shame burning in his eyes. Marcus continued, his tone almost gentle now. "I didn't serve for recognition or medals or respect. I served so people like you could have the freedom to make mistakes and learn from them. So learn from this. Every person you stop carries a story you can't see. Treat them accordingly. The weight of those words, delivered without anger or bitterness, hit harder than any punishment could have." Rivera offered an escort to Camp Pendleton. Marcus declined with a slight smile. "I've got supplies to deliver, Lieutenant Colonel. Best not keep people waiting." He climbed into the F-150, started the engine. The Marines formed to perfect lines, creating a corridor of honor as he drove through, each one saluting as he passed. 3 weeks later, Officers Johnson and Martinez completed their 3rd day of training at Camp Pendleton, learning what service truly meant. At a community charity event that Saturday, they saw him again. The same rusty truck, the same humble man unloading boxes. They approached, hats in hand. "Sergeant Major, we wanted to apologize properly." Marcus shook their hands firmly. "You came here to learn. That's what matters. Now go use it." The old Ford F-150 still ran, and Sergeant Major Marcus Cole still served. Because true service never retires. If this story reminded you never to judge by appearances, hit that like button. Honor our veterans by sharing this message with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories of unexpected heroes who walk among us every day, unrecognized and underestimated.